Hey Econ class, Jill and Haley here. One goal of our nation's economy is sustained growth. We can measure sustained growth by evaluating the gross domestic product, the GDP. This is the total market value of all final goods and services produced within the borders of a country in 1 year. As you can see in our graph, the current GDP has grown about 2.7% since Q2 of 2012. You may also notice a dip that the GDP took in 2009. This was the time of recession during the stock market crash of 2009. It reached a low of negative 8.7% that year. The GDP growth rate has stayed pretty consistent within a 2% range over the past few years, and we predict that it will remain this way in the future.
Another goal of our nation's economy is stable prices. We can measure stable prices by evaluating inflation or deflation. Inflation occurs when prices rise and purchasing power decreases. Deflation occurs when prices fall and purchasing power increases in the economy. Our graph displays a sustained increase in the average price level of the entire economy. Inflation is not an issue if it stays consistent between the 2 to 4% rate. Inflation is recorded from our nation's CPI, or Consumer Price Index, which is the measure of average prices from 1 year to the next. As you can see in the graph, at the beginning of 2012, our nation's inflation rate took a dramatic decrease and is recently on the rise, but is still lower now than the healthy range. We predict that in the next year, the inflation rate will remain around 2% and will most likely not go above 3% because it has not reached that high in this past year.
One last goal of our nation's economy is low unemployment. We can measure this by the unemployment rate. This is defined as the number of people of working age seeking a job but are without employment. Unemployment is recorded monthly, quarterly, and yearly. As we can see in the graph, the unemployment rate has declined almost 1% since the beginning of 2012. This declining trend is good to see as long as we don't eliminate unemployment altogether. In the next year, we expect the unemployment rate to keep this trend going and hopefully stay under 8%.
This graph displays aggregate demand. This shows the total demand of consumers, businesses, government, and foreigners in our economy. The demand curve demonstrates the relationship between the average price and quantity for all goods and services. Aggregate demand is determined by the amount of spending, or GDP, in an economy at any given price level. Any increase or decrease in the spending of consumers, businesses, government, or foreigners will cause a change in the aggregate demand curve.
This next graph displays aggregate supply. This consists of the quantity of all goods and services that firms are willing and able to produce and sell at all price levels. Unlike the demand curve, aggregate supply is upward sloping. The profit of a business will be higher as overall prices rise. The aggregate supply curve most commonly shifts with the use of technology, capital, and resources.
If considering opening a health food store chain in the U.S., we would encourage you to come start your business here. Our country's GDP is staying at a consistent rate, the inflation levels are at a healthy range between 2 and 4%, and there is still a good number of people looking for jobs. We would suggest building your business in either Nevada or California. These neighboring states have some of the highest unemployment rates in the country.